Hi guys, I'm Matthew, your VB tutor. Welcome to the fifth and final episode of the Excel Blackjack series. If you haven't watched the earlier episodes or the overview video, I recommend checking those out first. Just click the card at the top to view the full series. This episode's a bit longer, but I didn't want to split it up any further as it ties everything together. In this one, we'll be covering building the rest of the game, assigning buttons, testing the game, and creating some cheats. Alright, let's get into it. Now we can finally actually get into coding the game. In the game, we're going to have a few game sort of entities, variables that we use. All right, so we're going to have a private player as class player. Probably guess we're also going to do the dealer, so class dealer. Class as a player as well. Private game state, as we're going to create a custom enumeration, so a game state for that. And that's going to be private enum e game state. Alright, and we'll fill that out in just a second. There's going to be a few configuration sort of things that we can set up for ourselves, okay? So we're going to have private constant show cheats. Now, whether you actually have the cheats or not is completely up to you. I'm going to set them to off to start with. If you didn't set up those shapes on the game interface, then you won't be able to use the cheats. Private constant max bet as currency. We're just going to set this to a huge number, right? The player can't exceed that bet. At the moment, we don't want to sort of give them a limit, so we'll just give it a nice big number. Const the minimum bet, we don't want them to be able to bet any less than $1. We'll set it to 1. Then we'll do dealer max wager as long. We're going to set that to 17. So the dealer's maximum hand that they're trying to sort of reach is going to be 17. That just makes it so that you can set that and play with different options and things. Then we'll do the player start balance. This is going to be the balance the player has when they first start the game. So we're going to give them $100 to start with. We have reshuffle threshold. We're going to set that to 15. So that's basically saying if there's less than 15 cards in the deck, then we need to reshuffle the deck, or generate a new deck using the generate deck from our mod deck. We're going to have a private constant for the message timer. As long, we're going to set it to 150, and private constant deck count. This is going to be how many decks we actually use, so we're going to set it to 4. All right. So different game states. We're going to have 6 different states. We're going to have not ready. This is going to be when the game's not initialized properly. We need to do a ready one when we're dealing, when it's the player's turn, it's dealer's turn, and when the round is over. They're going to be our 6 game states. Remember our enumeration, if you start at 0, each one is going to be incrementally given a new value. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is when we're actually going to be initializing the game. So this is going to be when we click the restart button. That's going to initialize the game and set it to its ready sort of state. So we're going to create a public sub for the button restart click. So I'm going to use a bunch of different sort of references in here to different routines that we haven't built yet, but we'll sort of build them out. So the set game state is not ready at the start. Well, we want to make sure that our sheet is protected so that when the user doesn't have, like if we look here, we can still see that we can click in cells. We don't want this. This is it takes away from the immersion that we're in a kind of a game or something like a game, even though we're in Excel. So we'll stop the user from having this. We want to protect the sheet, but we only want to use user interface only. If you don't do this, then when you're adjusting shapes or doing different things, different values and things like that, then that's going to cause an error. This means that the code can still interact with those elements, but the player or the user can't. Then we're going to set our deck. So set deck equal to a new collection. That's going to initialize our deck. But for now, we're not actually going to be generating that because that's going to be when start or deal the hand. We'll set our player equal to a new player and set the player's card group. Card group equal to sheet games shapes player cards. Remember, this is our group of shapes we've got here for the player cards and the dealer cards. So before I go ahead, that message should definitely be above those cards. Okay. So we've set the player card group. Now we want to just make sure that the player is completely reset. That should be the case anyway, because we're, resetting or instantiating the player, but we'll just do that reset just as a secondary sort of precaution. We'll set the balance equal to the player start balance that we had up here. Now for our dealer, we'll do set dealer equal to a new player as well. We'll set the dealer's card group. It's going to be the same as this. Dealer cards. And then we'll do dealer max wager, and we'll set that equal to that parameter we've assigned up the top. And reset the dealer. Now that everything's kind of set up, we can set the game state to ready. We're going to set our player bet equal to 1. So that's just resetting the player's bet back down to its sort of initial state. Actually, we can set that equal to the minimum bet rather than 1. We're going to change bet 0. We're not actually changing the bet, but this is going to do some things. Then we display scores, display balance, and display a blank message. Alright, so that's that. As I said, there's a few functions in here that aren't really going to make sense, but I'm going to sort of go through all those now. So our get set game state, this is going to be sort of a pretty important one. So we're going to set that first. So we'll do private sub set game state by value state as game state. So this is our custom enumeration here, basically this stuff here. So first of all, we're going to set our private variable of game state equal to the state variable. We're going to display the relevant buttons for that game state, and then if the game state equals the dealer's turn, then we need to finish the hand. If the game state is round over, then we need to evaluate the game. Okay, again, we've got a few routines here that we haven't created yet, but we'll get into those. This display buttons one is going to be where we display the relevant buttons to the current state of the game. Okay, so we've got private sub display buttons. So the relevant buttons that we've got button restart, got button deal, button bet up. Remember, these are the buttons that we referred to in the shape handler. Button bet down, button bet up 5, button bet down 5, button bet all, and then our button hit and button stand. So we're going to set the visibility of these. So visible equals, and in here we're going to do if the game state equals not ready, or the game state equals ready. So we can just set the visibility of that equal to whether the game state is not ready or it's ready. So we only want the restart button visible when the game is not ready or it's ready. We don't want it to happen in the dealer turn, in the player turn, or when we're rounds over or anything like that. So the deal is going to be only available when the game state is ready, and that's going to be the same for all of these bet options as well. For our hit and stand, that they're only going to be available when it's the player's turn. And that's it. So that's our display buttons function. Now these ones aren't going to make a lot of sense if I go into those now. So we'll go into the other components first. So we'll go into where we deal card. Right. We'll do a public sub for button deal. Click. Then this will do if the game state equals not ready, then we need to set the game state equals to not ready. Because if it's not ready, then we're showing the relevant buttons, right? And after that's done, we exit the sub. Once we do that, we set the game state equal to the player's turn. Because if we've pressed deal, then we're starting the player's turn, and we're going to deal the initial cards. So deal initial cards. So the player's balance equal to the player.balance minus the player's bet. So this is basically taking their bet out of their balance, so that when they say you've got $100, you've bet $10. You start the round, that $10 is now gone, so you've only got $90. But what you get back will be either 2 times your initial bet, depending on if you win or lose. Alright, so we set the balance, then we'll display the scores. Display the balance. Actually, in here we'll do if the player is Blackjack, because when they first dealt their cards, and if they get Blackjack, then the round's immediately over. So set game state equals to round over. So this deal initial cards, this is going to be where we actually sort of start to deal the cards to start the game. So we're going to refer to that as a private sub, deal initial cards. And first we're going to check if the deck count is less than or equal to the reshuffle threshold. Then we set the deck equal to generate deck. Equal to generate deck with the deck count parameter. Okay, so when we first start, the deck count is going to be 0. It's going to be an empty deck. So we're going to, that's definitely going to be less than our threshold. So if our deck count is less than that threshold, then we set the deck equal to generate a new deck. So we've got a new shuffled deck with, in our case, we've got 4 decks all shuffled together. And here we're going to reset the dealer, reset the player, and the dealer, add card. We're going to deal a card. Again, this deal card isn't going to make a lot of sense yet, but we'll get to that next. So we're going to deal a card to the dealer, deal a card to the player. This is going to be the face-up value of that card. So the first card that the dealer's dealt is going to be face down. So it's going to be face up equals false, so that's going to be face down. And then want to add, so the dealer gets the first card, then the player, then the dealer, then the player. So the player gets 2, dealer gets 2. Only the first card of the dealer is face down. Alright, so if you remember this add card routine, right? Add card, it accepts a class card. So we're going to need to create this deal card to return a class card object. Okay, so we'll do that now. So we'll do private function deal card. We'll have an optional bival face up as boolean true. We want face up as default, and then we can set the face down value if we need to. And that's going to return a class card. So in this, we're going to have a card object, so as dim class card, if deck.count equals 0. So we just need to make sure that if the deck isn't completely empty, by the time it gets to this, it should never be 0 anyway, because this is always going to trigger first. But this is just a caution just in case. So set deck equals generate deck count, and if. Alright, then we need to set that card equal to the first item in the deck. So that's pulling the first card off the top of the deck. And then we need to remove that card from the deck. So deck.remove the first item in the deck. So we've just pulled the card off the deck and given that, grab that as a card object. So card face up to the face up parameter that we passed in. And then we set deal card equal to that card object. Alright, so when we do add card, we deal a card to the dealer. This is going to be face down. That goes and grabs the first card from the deck, makes it face down, and returns that so that that's now in the dealer's hand, and does that for the player, dealer, and then the player again. Okay, so that's our deal initial cards. I think the best thing to do now is to do the hit and stand buttons, because they're going to be quite simple. So we'll do public sub button hit, click, if game state equals not ready. So we'll just do the same thing up here. This is just in case the game state crashes or something, it's returning to the not ready state, so we'll just reinitialize the game. Then if they're hit, then we're dealing them a new card, so we'll do player.add card deal card. Okay, then we just need to display the scores, and if the player is busted, then set game state to dealer turn. Alright, that's all our hit button is going to do. Then our stand button, so public sub button stand, click. Again, just need to double check that the game is actually ready. Set the player to stand, it is true. And then we'll set the game state to the dealer turn. Alright, so that's all of our sort of primary buttons done. Now we're going to do the function where in the game state, we set the game state to the dealer's turn. We need to finish the hand, right? So we're going to finish hand. So we're going to do that next. So private sub finish hand. So for the dealer, once it goes to the dealer's turn, we need to have the cards go face up. So turn the cards face up for the dealer. And we display the scores. This is going to then show the dealer's current hand. And we do while not dealer is busted and not dealer should stop and not player.is busted. Okay, and we loop. So in here, we're going to loop through and issue the dealer a new card each time. If, once the dealer is busted, then it's going to exit out of this loop and finish the turn. So we'll do events, because we're doing a loop where we want to actually display things to the user, and we'll do an application.wait. Now time value. So basically we're going to wait 1 second between each card being issued to the dealer. That's just going to give the effect of actually dealing a card one by one, rather than just suddenly the dealer's completely dealt. We'll do dealer.addCard, deal card, and then display the scores. Then finally, once the dealer is busted, should stop, or the player is busted, then we set the game state equals round over. Now, in the game state, once the round is over, we need to evaluate the game. So evaluating the game is going to basically give us the game result. So has the player won? Has the player lost? Is the player blackjack? Has the dealer done a backflip or whatever? So let's do that then. So private sub evaluate game. Going to have a variable for the amount the player has won as currency. The message text, because we want to display a message once the game's finished. String. We're just going to do a bunch of if statements and then go to this end game label once it's jumped into each of those. So if player dot is blackjack and not dealer is blackjack, then the amount won for that is going to be the player's bet times 2.5. If they're blackjack, then that's the best hand. They get the highest payout from that. So that's going to be 2.5 times their original bet. Message text for that is going to be, we'll say player blackjack. And on a new line, we'll tell them how much they've won. So we'll go 1. And we'll format amount 1 as that of a format. We're also going to say the player won, so that's going to increment the amount of wins that they have, and then we're going to go to the end game label. Then in the chance that the player is busted, so if player.is busted, and we're going to do a similar thing here, but the amount 1 is going to be 0. I'm going to say player busted. I'm going to say they lost the player.bet amount. And we're going to say the player lost. Alright, then that's going to jump down to the end game label again. And then we have if not dealer dot is busted. Oops. So that's indented properly. Alright, we're also going to have an else statement in here for this. So if the dealer is busted, then it's going to come down here. The player won't be busted because it's already past this, and it's said that the player hasn't busted. So the amount 1 is going to be player bet times 2. So yeah, if the dealer has busted, then the player wins essentially. So we'll do message text player 1, and we'll say they won the amount 1. Player 1, and go to end game again. Okay, and then we're going to have if the dealer isn't busted, then the player get total is greater than the dealer get total. Remember, neither of these are going to be over 21, because if the player was over 21, then they would be busted, so they wouldn't have passed here. If the dealer was over 21, then the dealer would be busted, so they're going to jump down to here. So this already assumes that both the dealer and the player aren't busted. So now we can just say if the player's total is greater than the dealer's total, then that means the player won. So we'll copy that from down here. If the player.getTotal equals the dealer.getTotal, so they tie, then we're going to have the amount won equals the player bet, so it's just going to return the initial bet back to the player. So we'll say player tied, and the value is pushed back to the player. And we'll give them, say the player tied. That's going to increment the tied amount. And then the last one is going to be if the player total is less than the dealer total, then the amount won is going to be 0. So the player lost, and they lost is going to be the same as up here, and player.lost. And that's it. That's all the possible combinations of whether the player won or the dealer won or the player lost, dealer tied, anything like that. In the end game here, we're going to first just make sure, because the game's over, we want to make sure that the dealer's cards are turned face up, so we'll turn the cards face up. We'll display scores again. Player.balance equals player.balance plus the amount won. So if they lost, then that's going to be 0. And remember, the bet amount was already removed from their balance once they dealt the cards. So if they were on $100, they bet $10, their balance was now $90, they lost. We're not adding anything back to that $90 if they lost. If they won, they get 2 times that, so they go up to $110. If they blackjack, they get 2.5 times that, so they go up to $115. That's how the sort of balance works for the players. Then we're going to display the balances. We're going to display the message. We haven't made this function yet, but we'll get to that. The player bet equals, we want to make sure that the player's bet doesn't exceed their balance. So we'll do player.bet, player.balance. So if the player's balance is, $5 and their bet was $10, then it'll set the balance to $5. But if their balance was $20, it'll leave their bet as it was. And then we change the bet to 0, by 0. We'll get to that again in a minute. If the player balance equals 0, then that means it's game over, the player's bankrupt. So we'll do display message, player bankrupt, and please start a new game. And this display message is also going to have a permanent state, so we'll have that as true as the permanent state, and we'll set the game state back to not ready, which is going to mean that they only have the option to restart the game. If the player balance isn't 0, then we can set the game to ready. We might even make sure, capture all sort of case, if the player balance is less than 0, not that it should ever happen, but just to be sure. Now we've got all these display scores, display balance, display message. We haven't actually created any of these routines yet. I think that's going to be the next sort of most important thing to do. So we're going to do private sub display balance. So in here, we set shape text. This is what we created in the shape handler, set shape text. So this is just an easy way for us to set the text of that shape. And we'll do set shape text of the balance amount, the shape for that. Going to be balance amount. Format, player balance, and we'll format that like a nicely formatted currency. That's all that one needs to be. The display scores, so private sub display scores. The scores is going to be the player's hand size as well as whether the player, how many times the player's won, lost, tied, and so on. This will also call the cheats, so we're going to create display cheats as well to show you how we're going to actually, how the player could potentially cheat. So set shape text, and we want to do the hand size, so the player's hand size and amount. And do if player is busted, player.get total and bust, else just show the total. Then we're going to do the same thing for the dealer. Dealer amount. If the dealer is busted, do the same sort of thing. So it should have a close bracket at the end of that. Then we want to display the score for wins, losses, and ties. Should not have that there. It's going to be wins amount, losses amount, and ties amount. Okay. So set shape text, wins amount, player.wins. Nice and easy. The same thing for losses and ties. Player.losses and player.ties. And then we're going to call display cheats. This is going to be something that we'll create right at the very end of the video. I won't get into that right now because that's sort of like an option extra. Then we're going to have our display message. So private sub display message. We're going to have bival. This is going to be the text that we want to display. Then we're going to have an optional bival permanent as boolean equals false. Now the first thing we'll do in here, we're going to want to disable the buttons, right? To disable the buttons, remember that cover for the buttons that we created. So this one, cover buttons. All we need to do is just show that, okay? So we're just going to set shape visibility of cover buttons equals true. And we're gonna dimension a shape as a shape. I'm gonna set that shape equal to the message shape. So that's going to be this big shape here. All right. So with shape dot text frame to dot text range, text equal to the text that we've been sent. Font fill transparency equals 0. Do shape fill transparency and the shape line transparency. And finally, we just want to make sure the shape is actually visible. Equals true. So if not permanent, so if the shape isn't permanent, then we need to do something to actually end up getting rid of it. Is permanent, then we're not going to end up getting rid of the shape in the first place. So if the text doesn't equal nothing, then we need to actually show the message. Once the message has been shown, then we set its visibility equal to false. And what we want to do is loop through, so dimension I as long, and we'll loop I 0 to message timer. What this is going to do is set the font fill transparency equal to I over the message timer. You can do the same thing for the shape fill and the shape line. And do events means that it'll actually display it as it's reducing its visibility. Then once this is all over, then we can uncover the buttons again. Set shape visibility, it was false. Alright, so that's how we display our message. Now let's just do a quick compile to see if there's any issues. Game could be. Change bet. Oh yeah, we haven't created that yet. Alright, so we'll get onto this one next then, so the change bet. Do that after our buttons, so private sub change bet. And that's going to set by val amount as long. So first we're going to say player.bet equals player.bet plus amount. So if we're changing the bet by 1, then that's going to increase the player's bet by 1. If we're changing the bet by 5, then that's going to change the player's bet by 5. In these instances where we already set the player's bet, if we change it by 0, then that just triggers this without actually changing the bet. Alright, so then we do player.bet, and we need to check it against our minimum and maximum bet values. So we'll do application.max player.bet and compare that to the minimum bet. And then we do the same, sort of the inverse, so we do the min, comparing that to the maximum. Okay. And then finally we double check that the bet hasn't gone past the player's balance. So do player.bet equals application.min player.bet and player.balance. And then we can just set the shape text of the bet amount is hide that. This one here. Set shape text bet amount equals format player bet $0 like that. Alright, what's next? We'll do debug, display cheats, ignore that one for now, and everything else should be pretty much working. We'll still have to actually create the buttons for changing the bet, so we'll do that now. Do public sub change bet click. Now this is actually going to accept a by val amount long. Now this is going to be our click event, and this is going to have a parameter. I'm going to show you how to actually create a parameter when you're calling or when you're clicking a button. So what we're going to have is the bet all is going to say 999. So we're going to say if the amount equals 999, then the player.bet equals the player.balance, and then we change bet 0. So that's just going to call this and then compare all these and set the bet amount to this, right? If it's not that, then we change bet by the amount. Alright, that one routine is going to handle the click events for all of our betting buttons. So let's go and actually start to create all of these click events. So I've got the restart button, assign macro, button restart, done. The hit macro, assign, button hit, done, stand, button stand. We also have the deal button, which is currently hidden. Assign macro, button deal. Now, how do we actually make these pass a parameter to that routine? So we've got the routine that's going to be called change bet click. In here, we'll go assign macro. We'll do a single quote, put the routine name there, a space, 1, and close the single quote. That's going to pass the value 1 to that routine. I'm going to copy that. This one, do the same thing, so we'll do -1. This one we'll do -5. This one will be +5, so all 5. And bet all, that's going to be the 999. Okay. Now these should all be reasonably functional, so let's take a quick look and see what's happening. We'll do. Alright, so one thing I forgot to do here was actually set the visible state of all buttons. Alright, so they're done. So let's go try again. Restart. There we go. So we've now initialized the game and we can start to bet. So change those bet amounts. That will never go below 1. We bet all. That should set it to $100. We can't go above that, but we can reduce the bet again. And if we deal, that's not showing the player's hand. So let's just see what's happening. This will unprotect the sheet because we didn't check that. There we go. So those two need to be actually visible. Just the internal cards in that shouldn't be visible. There we go. We've got our hand as 19. I'm going to stand. I'm going to deal the dealer. Dealer got to 18. So I beat the dealer. I won. You see our wins incremented by 1. My balance increased by 50 because I bet $50. Let's just go all in. We'll bet all again. We'll go deal. And I got blackjack. Did not plan that. We'll try again. We'll go bet all, deal. Hand is 18. We'll stand. We tied with the dealer. The dealer got 18. We got 18. So that increased our ties. And I'm going to make myself bust on this one. So we'll do 18. Hit. We definitely busted. And there we go. Player bankrupt. Please start a new game. See that shape's not quite wide enough, so I'll just make that a bit wider. Get that picture. Make sure that restart button is covered as well. There we go. Then we can restart. And we've got a new game. And now you can actually play the game. And there you have it. Your game's actually now functional. You can see when we deal, didn't blackjack again, the dealer has one card that's face down, one card that's face up. It only shows the value of the face up card, but it shows the value of our entire hand. As we hit, we get more cards, and it increases the hand value. Stand, the dealer doesn't pass 17 because that's what we've set their max wager to, so they don't deal any further. I got to 21, player 1, because I got 21 when they got 20. That was a very risky play, but you get the point. And we can reset the game, sets our balance back to the default, sets our bets, everything like that. And that's basically our operational blackjack game in Excel. Now, there are still these cheats down the bottom, so we'll quickly get into that and show you what the code is like for those. So uncomment that, display cheats, and we're going to create that routine. So private sub display cheats. Now, all of this is obviously going to be within our sheet game. There's going to be quite a bit to change, so we're going to just do with a with event there. We'll do set shape visibility, and we're going to set the visibility of all of these different items down here. So I'll make sure I unprotect that. This one is cheat upcoming. So upcoming and the label. And the value for each of those to set the visibility is going to be the show cheats variable. So at the moment that's set to false. When we set it to true, that's going to show all these cheat labels and shapes. Shape is spell properly. There we go. So if show cheats, then we're going to want to do a few things. So if the deck count is greater than 0, then regardless of whether the deck is filled or is not filled, we're going to set the shape text of the in shoe to the deck count. So we'll do set shape text with it sheet in shoe, and we'll do deck count. All right. So regardless of whether there's cards in the deck or not, that's going to show us how many cards are in the deck. You set shape text in here. So this is going to be our bust chance. So this is going to be this shape here. In here we're going to do format bust cards. So we're going to create a function that calculates how many cards will make us bust in the current deck. And divide that by the deck count. And that's going to be a percentage, so we're going to format that as a %. Next we're going to do set shape text, the suggestion here. So if player.get total plus deck 1 dot game value. So the first item in the deck, so that's the very top item or the next card, we're going to get the value of that. So if the total of the player plus the next card's value is greater than 21, then stand, else we want to hit. Right? So if the player's total plus the next card is greater than 21, we don't want to draw the card. Otherwise, we can safely draw. So it doesn't matter if we're on 20. If the card on the top of the deck is an ace, then that's going to tell us we can hit. And then the next one is going to be the upcoming cards. So this is going to get us a list of upcoming cards. So we'll do set shape text, and we're going to create a routine to grab those. So upcoming cards. I'm going to do the same thing in here, except we're just going to make this going to be a format 0. Suggestion is going to be nothing. Upcoming cards is going to be nothing as well. So these are what's going to show if the deck is empty. These are what's going to show if the deck has got some cards in there. And it's always going to show the deck count. So we're going to create a quick function for bust cards. So we'll do private function bust cards as long. That's going to give us basically an amount of cards that's going to make us bust that are currently in the deck. So card as last card for each card in the deck. You're going to say if player dot get total plus the card dot game value is greater than 21. So it's going to say, it's going to loop through each card and it's going to count how many cards are going to give you a result that's going to make you bust. So we'll say bust cards equals bust cards plus 1. Okay? So when we get the bust chance, that's going to say, all right, there's 50 cards in the deck, 10 are going to make you bust, so that's going to give you a percentage of, like, what's that, 20%? It's going to say there's a 20% chance that you will bust. And then we're going to do a routine or a function that's going to get the upcoming cards as a string. So we'll do private function upcoming cards. And we're going to have an optional show max. So it's going to be how many cards will actually show. And the default for that I'm going to set to 7. So it's going to show 7 cards coming as string. Again, we're going to loop through the deck, so deck dim card as, and we're going to also grab I, so for each card in the deck, you increment I. If I is greater than show max, then we exit the loop. Otherwise, we do upcoming cards equals upcoming cards, and the new card name, and append those onto each other. Then we just want to get rid of that trailing comma, so we'll do upcoming cards equals, we'll say next, so that they know that the first one in our little list is going to be the next card. Upcoming cards length of upcoming cards -2, because we have comma and a space, so we get rid of 2 from the end of the card string. All right, so let's see what those cheats look like then. So we have to obviously turn cheats on before they'll work. If we restart, cards in shoe 0, let's deal. There we go. So we've got 204 cards in the shoe, and it says we've got a 92.16% chance to bust. So this is completely blind. This is basically akin to counting cards at a casino. But we can see here the upcoming cards. So we can see the next card is a 9. So it's telling us that we need to stand. All right. We deal again. We got 16. We got a 60% chance to bust. But we know that the next card is a king, so it's going to tell us to stand. Normally, we might actually bet at the hit on this in this kind of situation. So we've lost. But you can kind of calculate this because we know that the dealer. We can calculate this before we bet. We know the dealer has 1 card, then we're dealt 1 card, then the dealer, then us. Okay, so this king is going to be the dealer's. The 2 is going to be ours, the ace is going to be the dealer's, 9 is going to be ours. So the king and the ace, that's going to actually make the dealer blackjack. We're never going to win. So in this case, you'd want to bet the absolute minimum, deal. We can hit if we want, stand, but we know the dealer has blackjacked. All right, so now the dealer's going to get the 4 and the ace, we're going to get the 6 and the jack. So we can deal. We know that the next one's going to be a 3. And if we do 3 again, that's going to make us up to 22. So we're going to bust. So we need to stand. And then the dealer only gets to 18. So we win. So you have a much higher chance, obviously, if you pay attention to the information you're given, to make informed decisions. Although, This isn't obviously something that you'd have in a real game, but it's interesting to see how you can grab that information. That wraps up the series. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear how your version turned out, or if you added any new features. Or maybe this inspired you to create your own game. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to check out the full-length version if you want a refresher or want to share the entire build with a friend. As always, the final product is available on my Patreon for one-time purchase or for free to second-tier members. Thanks again for watching. This is your VB Tutor signing out.